I have made a lot of Parmigiana over the years, but this one might be the best I have ever made. I used 2 eggplants here, enough for 2 meals, one hot, one cold, for Julie and me. I sliced them diagonally, it just makes them look more elegant, especially once they are layered later on. 1 centimeter thick is about right. Any thinner and they start to collapse, a bit like that strange paper you find when you buy new shoes. But before we get into it, there is something I would like to clear up. You still see people salting their eggplants, saying it to remove bitterness, and maybe once upon a time that was true. All the varieties had more seeds and they could taste sharp, but the eggplants we use today, they are already mild, there is no need to salt them. In fact, adding salt now just pulls out water you do not want, and if you are roasting them like I am here, that water makes them steam instead of soften properly. Now, you can of course fry your eggplants instead of roasting them. Fried slices are lovely too, but they will be softer and a little oilier. What I like about the oven is this: they cook all at once, so it's quicker. They keep their shape much better and they get gently roasted, not soggy. You will see that later when they come out. A little olive oil, a little oregano, onto the baking paper and into the oven at 180 degrees for 20 minutes. For the base of the sauce, I'm using a combination of finely chopped onion and red pepper. They bring sweetness, natural sweetness, which will gently carry through to the whole dish. I start them off together in a little olive oil. No rush, just letting them soften and release their flavour as they become tender. The finer they chop, the quicker they cook, and the more delicate and balanced the sauce becomes. I take the same approach with garlic. I crush 2 cloves with the side of the knife, then chop them very small, almost like a paste. This way they release everything they have to give. But I do not add the garlic straight away. I wait 2 or 3 minutes, because garlic cooks much faster than onion and pepper, and I want to keep the flavours soft and round, not burnt or sharp. I'm using a tin of chopped tomatoes here. They are convenient, they are affordable, and for this kind of dish they work just as well as anything more expensive. I actually used the cheapest ones I could find. You can use fresh tomatoes if you prefer, cherry or plum would work. But they need to be juicy. What matters here is the softness, not the price. Some people add a teaspoon of sugar to balance the acidity of tin tomatoes, and I sometimes do that too, but only in a very simple tomato sauce where the tomato is doing all the work. In this case though, there is no need. The natural sweetness from the onion and pepper is already in the pan. That's enough to keep everything in balance without adding any extra sugar or unnecessary calories. At this point I am covering the pan with the lid and then releasing it again, as I had forgotten to add some extra oregano, so the lid comes off again, a pinch of oregano goes in, and then I cover it properly and let the sauce simmer gently for about 10 minutes. While the sauce is simmering, I grate some Parmigiano Reggiano, slice a couple of fresh mozzarella balls and lay out a few slices of cooked ham. Everything goes onto the board, ready for layering later. On a hot day like this, I keep the cheese and the ham in the fridge until the last moment, just to make sure they stay fresh and hold their shape. And the ham is optional, of course. You can leave it out if you want to keep the dish vegetarian. It still works beautifully. The eggplants are just out of the oven and they look beautiful, golden, soft, and still holding their shape. You can see how flexible they are. That is because they have been roasted, not fried. And at this point, if you add a little salt and pepper, they could easily become a side dish on their own, or even a sandwich filling. In fact, when I was a little boy, my mum used to do just that. There were 6 of us to feed every day, and she would often roast extra eggplant slices, slip one in a bread roll, wrap it in foil, and send us off to school with it. Most of my friends would look at it with surprise, maybe even judgment. But little did they know how delicious it was. It was my mum's way of saving money on expensive fillings and feeding us something simple and healthy. Now I start assembling the dish. I spread just a little sauce at the bottom, about 1/3 of the total. The reason I use less here is that the sauce will rise and filter through as it cooks. You do not want it to pool at the bottom, you want the base to stay structured. I start placing the smaller eggplant slices first. These are the ones that might not look as neat, so I keep the best looking ones for the top layer. I fill any gaps by cutting the slices in half, like a little puzzle, just enough to cover. Then I add my mozzarella in a single layer, and then all of the ham, overlapping gently, like tiles. I press everything down with the palm of my hand, not too hard, just enough to keep it compact. That way, the final dish holds its shape when sliced, and the layers look clean and beautiful on the plate. A little Parmigiano on top of the ham, then the second layer of eggplants, this time the more elegant slices. And finally, I spread the rest of the sauce over the top, enough to cover everything, but not drown it. Then it goes back into the oven for 20 minutes at 180 degrees. Now I mix some dry breadcrumbs with grated Parmigiano, and I do it right here in the frying pan I used earlier. The pan is cold now, but it still has a little tomato stuck to the bottom. Nothing dramatic, just a few bits full of flavor. You can absolutely use a bowl for this, it won't change the result that much. But for me this is second nature, I just cannot bring myself to waste anything. I have too much respect for food and for the people who work hard every day to grow it, pick it, transport it and stock it in the supermarkets. There is a whole chain behind what we eat, and especially now when everything costs more, every little bit matters, even if sometimes it's only psychological. So I use the pan to pick up the last of the flavor, and it also makes the washing up a little easier. This is home cooking, where you make the most of what you have. The dish has now come out of the oven, and I sprinkle over the breadcrumb and Parmigiano mix. This step is simple, but it adds texture and a little extra flavor on top. Then I drizzle over a bit of double cream. It's not essential, but because I'm using breadcrumbs, the cream brings everything together, softening them slightly and adding a layer of creaminess. And now it goes back in the oven one more time. It's out of the oven now, and I gently run the back of my knife across the top. You can hear it, that beautiful sound of crisp, caramelized breadcrumbs. But before cutting into it, I will let it rest for about 10 minutes. Once it has cooled slightly, I lift out two beautiful slices. They hold the shape perfectly. You can see the melted mozzarella, the thick layer of ham, and everything sitting just as it should. And one last thing, make enough to keep some in the fridge. The next day, cold straight from the fridge, it becomes something else. Still the same dish, but the flavor changes. Cooler, deeper, incredibly refreshing, almost like it was designed to be eaten that way. I taste a little, it is just perfect.